Hi guys, it's Nick. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, today we're going to be talking about how to mix different wood tones in the same space. This is something that came through in the comment section of a few of my different videos where you guys said it's a real struggle to try to bring together different wood tones in the same space, and that's what we're going to touch on here. Let's do it. Okay, so tip number one, you guys, and this one might seem a little bit obvious, but the more wood tones that you introduce in your space, the more eclectic it's going to feel. So if you're looking for something that's super contemporary, that's really modern and really clean, you're probably gonna want to limit the amount of wood tones that you have in your space. Some places that are super contemporary might even just have one wood tone throughout the space. But if you wanted to have that really like vintage feel, or like you want it to feel really eclectic, you wanted to have maybe a bunch of antiques, you want to bring in a bunch of different wood tones, that's fine. Just make sure that you understand that that is the vibe that you're going to be going for. So if you want to create something really contemporary, but you're mixing 5 or 6 different wood tones and you don't know quite why it isn't working, that might be the reason why. You might want to limit and focus down into just a few different wood tones, or maybe even just one, to create something really clean and contemporary and cohesive. But if you are looking for something that's a little bit more vintage, a little bit more sort of lived in, where you've kind of maybe inherited some pieces and you're really just looking to bring them all together, then bringing in different wood tones is fine. Just know that that's kind of the vibe that you're going to be creating. Okay, tip number 2, speaking of the vibe that you're going to be creating, is to really look at trying to match the different textures or the different grains of the wood. So if you are going for something that's really rustic, maybe you've got a lot of like painted furniture, maybe you've got something with lots of knots, lots of character, just really rustic and rough, and maybe a lot of reclaimed wood, whatever, my advice would be to use that throughout the space. So I would avoid mixing sort of really clean, elegant, sanded, or even waxed woods, comparing that to something that's really rustic. I would say don't sort of really be cautious about mixing those together in the same space. So sort of really paying attention, kind of like tip number 1, where you're really looking at what's the vibe that you're trying to create in the space, and really sort of using that wood consistently throughout the space. So if you want something that's really rustic and really worn and weathered, that's fine. Just try to really bring that through in lots of different types of wood grains that you're going to be bringing into the space. It's when you start mixing the different textures of wood that you start getting into trouble. And then tip number 3 is of course something we talk a lot about on this channel, which is matching the undertones. So for that, I'm going to refer you to my color palette video for you to check out. Really what we're looking for here is that you got to be really careful mixing these warm woods and these sort of cooler woods. Now here's the thing with woods. Woods tend to lean on the warmer side. They oftentimes have sort of a yellow undertone or orange undertones, maybe even a pink or a red undertone. That's fairly common in woods, but there are still a lot of whitewashed woods, a lot of sort of gray woods that are really on the cooler side. You want to be really careful about sort of matching these warm and cool wood tones together. So if you're committing to warmer wood furniture, try to bring that throughout the space. So if you're bringing in something like really warm acorn wood or bamboo or something, you're mixing it with that really cool gray wood tones, you might start to bump into some problems where you're wondering why they're not really working together. So in order to create that cohesion, we're creating that sort of consistent undertone throughout the space. And again, if you're kind of a little bit confused on undertones, I totally understand. I will link at the end of this video to my color palette video, because that really sort of explains all the different tints, tones, and shades that are involved in each color. And that applies to wood as well. So it's really just important to understand that first in order to make sure that all these different undertones are working together in the space. And tip number 4, you guys, is to buffer the woods against each other if you're a little bit concerned that they're not going to work. So this can really be applied to something like a dining room table and maybe a very different colored wood flooring. If you're a little bit concerned that they're not going to work together, put a rug under the dining room table, right? So if you're really concerned about maybe like the wooden legs that are on the bottom of your couch or on your side chairs, and you're really worried if they're not going to work with your wood flooring, putting a rug underneath just sort of tricks the eye to sort of create a bit of a barrier or a buffer sort of between the two woods, and that really increases the likelihood that they're going to work together. Okay, and then tip number 5, kind of really also building on that tip number 4 as well here, is when in doubt, create contrast if you can. So as a general rule, I typically find that if you can't match something perfectly, then go very different. Go for contrast, you know? Like if you're trying to match like a blonde wood and a wood that's maybe like a medium or a light medium tone, and you're worried like, they're like, you don't want to create a space where it looks like you intentionally tried to match something and like it was a swing and a miss. You know what I mean? Like you want to kind of avoid that, and you want to say, okay, well, if I'm not going to do something that's so similar, if I can't match it near perfectly, and a buffer doesn't really make sense, then let's just go completely different, right? We're matching those undertones, so we're still being conscious of how they're all playing off of each other, but at the end of the day, they're gonna be so different that it looks intentional. It looks like you tried to pick an item that is going to be very different than another one so that they are going to be working together, because in the end, contrast really sort of creates an interesting space. So you're sort of making a difficult design decision of combining different wood tones, and you're making it look really intentional, really purposeful, but again, it's working with the overall color palette and the mood of the space. Okay, and tip number 6 for you all is that if you are really concerned about trying to pull all these different woods together, let's say you've got a whole bunch of different woods going on and you're worried they're just not all gonna come together cohesively, there's other ways for you to create a really cohesive space. So there's different things like color and material and design style. So I personally think, and a lot of designers will agree, that color is one of the easiest ways to unify a space. So if you are defining your color palette and you decide that you're going to use a certain color or a couple of colors in your space, by repeating those colors throughout the space, it's going to look more cohesive. Even if the wood tones maybe aren't perfectly matched, even if the fact that, you know, you might have several wood tones going on and you're not quite sure if it's all going to look cohesive, there's other ways that you can make sure that your space looks cohesive besides necessarily using the wood tones. So tying it together with color, tying it together with material or with a certain design style is a great way of making sure your space ultimately does look cohesive, it does look beautiful, it does look like it all belongs together. However, you know, you might have picked some different wood pieces that you like that might not necessarily perfectly match. So you can still tie the space together even if the woods are a little bit different. So if you are interested in learning more about wood tones and color theory and all the rest of it, please check out my color palette video. It goes into all sorts of details on the tints, tones, and shades of color and really helps you pull together a wonderful color palette, including wood, that's going to work for your home. See you all in the next video.